Okay, folks, let's talk about this yield, this idea of yield as it applies to like a savings account for a bank. So let's say that let's deposit some money. Let's deposit, I don't know, let's just make it $100. I think I saw a minimum deposit of about $100 in a few of those online banks. And there were a whole bunch of yield rates. Let's make it simple. Let's make it 1%. It'll make the math easy for us to do kind of in our heads. So if we're gonna deposit $100 at 1% yield. Now what yield really means is that you're giving the bank money, and then they're gonna take that money and they're gonna do stuff with it. I don't know what bankers do. It's been a mystery to me ever since I learned about banks. But they invest it. They put in different kind of vehicles for investment. And the way I was taught was that the percent yield is a thank you that the bank pays you for allowing them to use your money, if that makes sense. So you give them a bunch of money, and they hang on to it and they invest it, but they invest it wisely so that they always end up with more money than they started, and then part of that money they end up with goes back to you as a thank you. Compare this, I'm gonna go on a quick little aside here because I'm recording this video April 16th, which is the day after normal tax day. Many people like to get a tax refund from the IRS each year, and I always try to tell my students, don't. Try to owe a little bit of money each year, or break even if you can, but it's probably easier just to owe a little bit. And the reason is, if the government keeps your overpaid taxes, and then they send you a check back after April 15th, a tax refund, they kept that money without giving you any kind of thank you. In other words, they kept all that extra money and sat on it, and they're not gonna give you any percent extra as a thank you, which I think is crap. So I learned years ago, don't give the government more money than they deserve. In fact, give them a little bit less, and that way you owe a little bit, but that way you're not giving them interest-free money. Anyway, sidetrack, we'll come back to that at some other point. So let's see what happens if we make a 1% yield per year. Let's keep it simple at first, per year. So I'm gonna make a little chart and do some math on the board here. So I'm gonna start counting, if it's okay with you all, at year 0. I'm gonna call year 0, that's the year we put the money in the account. So I'm gonna put amount in account. Ha, that rhymes. Account. Amount in account. And this little string is gonna keep getting in the way. We're gonna keep playing with it. Let's move this over a little so we can see it better. There we go. So at year 0, we put $100 in. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. $100 in the account. Easy. Then we let it sit for a year. And after a year, if we don't take the money out, we still have our additional $100, but the bank additionally gives us 1% of the amount that was there the year before. So, in other words, we still have the original 100. We maintained the original 100, the amount that was there before. But the bank gives us also an additional 1% of that previous amount. Now, 1% of $100 is just $1. So, in other words, we're going to have the $100 from last year plus an additional $1, which means we now have $101 after 1 year of sitting there at 1%. I'm going to draw a little blue box around that just to kind of make it pop out for us. That's a fun noise. So after 1 year, we have 1% more, $101. Good so far? Okay. Then we let it sit for 1 more year. Now here's where it gets interesting with the percentages. You might think, okay, well, here we had $100, but now at the end of 2 years, you maintain what was in there at the end of 1 year, which was $101. And we add 1% of $101 to that. So in other words, we keep the 101 because that was there at the end of year 1. But we add 1% of $101, which is $1.01. 1%. The reason I chose 1% so we can do it in our heads, all you gotta do is move the decimal point. Boop, boop. 1.01, that's $1.01, which means at the end of 2 years, we have $102.01. I'm gonna color code that red. More fun noises, these are great. So at the end of 2 years, we have $102.01, whereas at the end of 1 year, we had $101. You may have noticed, it's the same math is happening, but the percentage is being applied to a different number because the next year's number is dependent on the year right before it. So in other words, we're going to start in year 3, not with 101 and not with 100, but with $102.01. So we're going to have $102.01. That's the 100% from the year before. That comes down. But the bank gives us an additional 1% of that $102.01. Which means we get to keep the $102.01, but we get to add to it. Now we're going to get into fractions of pennies now, if that's okay. We're going to move this decimal place over. Boop, boop. It's going to be $1.02 and then an additional 100th of a cent. So this very strange amount that we're going to have at the end of 3 years, is going to be $103, $103, because I got to add that one of the 102, and then I got to be careful here. It's going to be 0.1 cent plus 2 cents is 0.03, 0.01. Oh boy. And I think at this point, I thought I found a nice big chalkboard, but I didn't really, because the math that I thought would fit, well, I guess it fit okay. It's there, I guess, especially if I put my head in a little white space here. But honestly, I think this is exactly why we have spreadsheets, is to not have to go through stuff like this. So I think, as a suggestion, maybe we should run back to the office and let's show how to do this in a spreadsheet. It's way easier. I know some of you have had kind of reservations about learning Excel. I think after you do this math in a spreadsheet, all your reservations are going to disappear. Let's head back and take a look.